It's okay. This is all just a misunderstanding. Not exactly standard issue for first contact scenarios. The words were simple, calm, and completely at odds with the high-stakes situation. You'd expect screaming, running, or at least some dignified panicking in a predator breach scenario, not conversational tones delivered like someone calming a startled horse. The faculty watched in disbelief as Zoe maintained that steady, even delivery, her vocal patterns remaining in the calm frequency range humans use for reassurance. Her voice carried no fear, no aggression, just calm acknowledgement of the creature's confusion. The shadow maw, conditioned to respond to fear pheromones and adrenaline spikes, encountered something new, peaceful intention. Its sensory systems were designed to detect threat indicators, elevated heart rates, fight or flight chemicals, defensive postures. Instead, it was getting neutral biological readings and vocal patterns that matched neither predator nor prey profiles. The creature's neural processors were recalculating faster than the faculty's emergency protocols could update. Human vocal patterns, when calm, have a particular frequency range that some predators interpret differently than distress calls. It's not some magical ability, just an evolutionary coincidence that calm human speech falls outside typical prey vocalization ranges. Zoe's steady tone and even pacing created auditory patterns the maw's threat assessment systems categorized as non-threatening communication rather than distress, signal, or challenge call. She wasn't trying to dominate or submit. She was establishing communication on neutral ground, treating the creature as an intelligent being rather than a dangerous animal. The creature's purring response wasn't in any database, because nobody had ever stayed calm long enough to hear it. The deep, resonant vibration started low in its chest cavity, a sound that should have indicated threat display according to all previous research. But the frequency modulation was different, softer, more rhythmic, with none of the aggressive harmonics documented in attack scenarios. The maw's body language shifted further, its head tilting to expose the vulnerable neck area, its claws fully retracting. This was the moment where the incident transformed from containment breach to interspecies communication event. This wasn't a predator-prey interaction anymore. It was two intelligent beings figuring each other out. The shadow maw was responding to Zoe's calm approach with curiosity rather than aggression, its intelligent override systems fully engaging now that the immediate threat assessment had been recalibrated. The creature's pupils dilated and contracted in patterns that matched Zoe's breathing rhythm, a synchronization that shouldn't have been possible across species barriers. Meanwhile, the faculty's emergency protocols were still stuck on containment and neutralization, while the human student had already progressed to establishing rapport. What happened next would make the xenobiology department rewrite every textbook they'd ever published. The shadow maw took a step forward, not in the stalking gait of a hunter but in the deliberate movement of an approaching participant. Its tail swished in a gentle arc that matched the rhythm of Zoe's ongoing, calm narration. The creature was responding to tone and intention rather than specific words, its advanced cognitive functions processing the human's peaceful approach as something worth investigating rather than eliminating. The entire predator-prey dynamic model was collapsing in real time, replaced by something the galactic scientific community had never documented: voluntary interspecies communication, initiated by the supposed prey. You know how in predator encounters, you expect either fighting or fleeing. Nobody expects belly rubs. The shadow maw's next move defied every known behavioral model for its species. Instead of attacking or retreating, it slowly lay down and exposed its vulnerable underside to Zoe. The movement wasn't tentative or submissive. It was deliberate, almost ceremonial, like someone presenting credentials at a diplomatic function. The creature's massive body settled onto the polished floor. Its lethal claws retracted completely, its formidable teeth concealed as it tilted its head to maintain eye contact. In predator behavior, this isn't just submission, it's the ultimate sign of trust. The complete relinquishing of defensive posture. Every vital area was exposed: the soft throat, the unprotected abdomen, the major arteries and organs that would normally be shielded during any confrontation. This was the kind of vulnerability that predator species only show to their closest pack members or mates. The gesture said, "I trust you not to harm me," more clearly than any translation software could manage. It was the biological equivalent of handing someone your weapon while turning your back. The crystalline specialists were frantically checking their instruments, certain there must be some malfunction. Their sensors showed the creature's vital signs remaining calm, its threat indicators all reading neutral, its muscle tension patterns indicating complete relaxation. This contradicted every data point ever collected on Kepler 442b predators. They recalibrated, ran diagnostic checks, even tapped their crystalline surfaces to reset their internal processors. The readings remained consistent. The galaxy's most dangerous predator was voluntarily making itself vulnerable to a species it should have considered prey. Professor Zicht's multiple eyes were wide with something between horror and academic excitement. His respiratory vents pulsed rapidly as he tried to process what he was witnessing. This wasn't just unusual behavior. It was theoretically impossible for a Kepler 442b apex predator. The creature's entire evolutionary history should have prevented this exact scenario. Its DNA was coded for aggression, its neural pathways wired for dominance displays, its instinctual programming designed to maintain constant defensive readiness. Yet here it was, lying on the floor like a domesticated animal seeking attention. Zoe's extended hand, the universal let's be friends gesture as humans call it, was accepted without hesitation. Her fingers made contact with the creature's neck, right where the protective plating gave way to softer tissue. The shadow maw's purring vibration intensified, resonating through the floor plates, its eyes half closed in what any human would recognize as contentment. This wasn't in any first contact manual or xenobiology textbook. It was something far more ancient and intuitive. The creature wasn't submitting to a dominant predator. It was offering partnership to an equal. Its body language showed none of the tension or wariness of submission displays documented in other species. This was voluntary cooperation, the kind that happens when two intelligent beings recognize mutual benefit. The maw's intelligence had overridden millions of years of evolutionary programming, because it calculated that friendship offered better returns than predation. It had assessed the human's approach, processed the non-threatening signals, and decided that alliance was preferable to conflict. The thing is, human friendship protocols look suspiciously like high-stakes interspecies diplomacy when done right. That simple hand gesture carried more diplomatic weight than 6 months of formal negotiations between the Corvani and the Galactic Council. It communicated trust, respect, and willingness to cooperate without requiring translation matrices or cultural interpreters. The professors were watching a masterclass in cross-species communication, delivered by a student who apparently skipped the required reading on proper interbeing interaction protocols. The containment breach had become an impromptu diplomatic reception, complete with the galaxy's most unlikely ambassador. We call it domestication, but that's not really accurate. It's more like mutual cooperation. Zoe's explanation to the astonished faculty upended centuries of zoological thinking. The galactic scientific community had always viewed domestication as a form of controlled subjugation, something you did to less advanced species through selective breeding and behavioral conditioning. They had entire departments dedicated to the ethics of interbeing dominance hierarchies and proper submission protocols. What they didn't have was a framework for what they were witnessing. Human history with animals wasn't about dominance. It was about finding ways to work together for mutual benefit. We didn't force wolves to become dogs. We offered them warmth and food in exchange for protection and hunting assistance. The relationship wasn't master and servant. It was two species realizing they could both do better by cooperating. This approach was so fundamentally different from galactic norms that the professors were struggling to process it. Their databases contained thousands of studies on predator control methods and exactly 0 on voluntary interspecies partnership formation. The shadow maw wasn't being domesticated. It was choosing to cooperate because it recognized the advantage. Its intelligent assessment systems had calculated that this human offered something more valuable than a meal, potential alliance. The creature's cognitive functions weren't being overridden or subdued. They were actively engaging in cost-benefit analysis that favored cooperation over conflict. This wasn't a conquered predator accepting its place in a hierarchy. It was an equal participant negotiating terms of engagement. This wasn't master and servant. It was partners who'd found common ground despite evolutionary differences. The creature maintained its agency throughout the interaction, making conscious choices rather than following instinctual programming. Its body language showed none of the tension or wariness associated with dominated animals, just the relaxed posture of someone who's found a useful business partner. The power dynamic wasn't vertical with human on top. It was horizontal, with both parties getting what they needed from the arrangement. The creature's intelligence allowed it to calculate that cooperation offered better outcomes than conflict. Its threat assessment systems had processed the classroom environment and determined that predation carried higher risks and lower rewards than alliance. Why hunt unpredictable prey in unfamiliar surroundings when you could partner with someone who understands the terrain? The Maw's evolutionary programming said, hunt, but its cognitive function said diplomacy might work better here. Zoe's calm authority wasn't about being the boss, but about being someone worth following voluntarily. She wasn't issuing commands or establishing dominance. She was demonstrating competence and reliability. Her steady approach showed the creature that she understood the situation and wasn't going to panic or make poor decisions. This wasn't about who was stronger or faster. It was about who could provide the most stable partnership in uncertain circumstances. The human was offering leadership through capability rather than coercion. The professors suddenly realized they were witnessing a new form of interspecies relationship. This wasn't in any of their textbooks or research papers. It was something entirely outside galactic scientific understanding. They watched as the Shadow Maw responded to Zoe's slight hand gestures with precise movements, the two of them developing a nonverbal communication system in real time. The creature wasn't obeying commands. It was participating in a dialogue, offering its own suggestions and adjustments to their developing partnership. What happened next would turn this classroom incident into a galactic case study. The Shadow Maw rose from its relaxed position and moved to Zoe's side, not in a subordinate trailing position but as an equal partner matching her stride. Its head height nearly matched hers, its movements coordinated with hers without any apparent instruction. They moved toward the still panicking faculty as a united front, the most dangerous predator in the galaxy, and the human student who'd somehow become its diplomatic representative. The containment breach was over. The interspecies cooperation experiment was just beginning. Here's the thing about pack hunters. They understand social structures better than solitary predators. The Shadow Maw's behavior patterns started making sense when viewed through a different lens. Previous researchers had studied them in isolation, observing individual hunting behaviors and threat responses, completely missing the social context that defined their natural interactions. They documented the creature's capabilities but not its community dynamics, like studying a wolf without understanding the pack. The submission display wasn't about surrendering. It was about pack bonding and establishing social hierarchy. When the creature exposed its vulnerable underside, it wasn't showing weakness. It was demonstrating trust within established social parameters. In pack societies, these gestures serve as relationship calibration, not defeat. The Maw was testing the waters of potential inclusion, offering the kind of vulnerability that strengthens social bonds among cooperative hunters. Shadow Maws are pack hunters, and their social behaviors include complex nonverbal communication and trust-building rituals. Their social structure relies on precise body language, vocalizations, and physical contact to maintain group cohesion. The purring, the head tilting, the careful approach. These weren't random behaviors but part of an elaborate social dance that previous researchers had misinterpreted as either aggression or submission. They'd been watching the steps without understanding the music. Zoe's calm, confident demeanor read to the creature as potential pack member rather than threat or prey. Her steady approach mirrored the behavior of confident pack leaders, her eye contact signaled engagement rather than challenge, and her relaxed posture indicated social comfort rather than defensive readiness. The human wasn't triggering predator-prey responses. She was activating social recognition protocols hardwired into the creature's pack mentality. The human approach to social dynamics, with its emphasis on communication and relationship building, accidentally spoke the Shadow Maw's language. Our species developed complex social structures that prioritize communication, trust building, and cooperative problem solving. These traits, evolved for human societies, happen to overlap significantly with pack hunter social protocols. Zoe wasn't using some special technique. She was just being human in a way that resonated with the creature's social programming. This wasn't domestication. It was interspecies pack formation, something never before documented. The creature wasn't being subjugated or trained. It was exploring the possibility of cross-species social integration. Its intelligent assessment systems recognized compatible social patterns and calculated that incorporation into a mixed-species pack might offer survival advantages. This was voluntary social expansion, not forced behavioral modification. The creature's purring, its body language, its acceptance of touch, all classic pack bonding behaviors misinterpreted by earlier researchers. They'd cataloged these behaviors as threat displays or stress responses because they only observed them in conflict situations. In proper social context, these same actions served as greeting rituals, trust verification, and social reinforcement. The researchers had been reading the dictionary without understanding the grammar. The faculty realized they hadn't been studying a solitary killer, but a social animal removed from its context. Their containment protocols, their research methods, their entire approach had been based on a fundamental misunderstanding of the creature's nature. They'd taken a being designed for complex social interaction and studied it in isolation, then wondered why their behavioral models didn't match reality. The problem wasn't with the subject, it was with the experimental design. Meanwhile, the implications for galactic diplomacy were starting to become alarmingly clear. If pack bonding could cross species lines this effectively, then traditional interspecies relations based on threat assessment and defensive posturing might be entirely wrong-headed. The human approach of seeking common ground and building relationships might not be naive idealism. It might be advanced social strategy that other species had simply failed to develop. The classroom incident suggested that many conflict scenarios might be resolvable through social integration rather than defensive measures. You know how evolutionary programming is supposed to be this unbreakable code written over millions of years? The Shadow Maw demonstrated that intelligence can override even the most deeply ingrained instincts. Every evolutionary advantage this creature possessed told it to see Zoe as prey or competition. Its teeth were designed for tearing flesh, its claws for dismemberment, its senses for tracking vulnerable targets. Million-year-old programming screamed that this small bipedal creature should be either meal or threat. Yet none of that mattered when higher cognitive functions engaged. But intelligence allows for cost-benefit analysis that can supersede automatic responses. The creature's neural processors weren't just running instinct scripts. They were running complex simulation models comparing potential outcomes. Attack scenarios showed high energy expenditure with uncertain returns in an unfamiliar environment. Cooperation scenarios showed potential information gain, social connection, and navigational assistance. The calculations weren't about right or wrong. They were about efficiency and results. The instinct said hunt, while the intelligence said negotiate. The creature calculated that cooperation offered better outcomes than predation in this specific context. It wasn't rejecting its nature. It was applying its capabilities more strategically. Why waste energy hunting unpredictable prey when you could gain an ally who understands this strange environment? The Maw's goals remained the same: security, resources, advantage. But the methods shifted from force to diplomacy. This was evolutionary adaptation happening in real time, not over generations. This wasn't about overriding instinct so much as employing higher cognitive functions to achieve the same goals differently. The Shadow Maw still wanted security, resources, and social connection. It just found a better way to get them. Its cooperative approach wasn't weakness. It was sophisticated problem solving. The creature recognized that sometimes the most efficient path to survival isn't through confrontation but through alliance. This was predator intelligence applied to social strategy rather than hunting tactics. Zoe's intelligent approach triggered an intelligent response, creating a feedback loop of non-instinctual behavior. Her calm communication signaled that she wasn't operating on basic prey programming either. Two intelligent beings recognized each other's cognitive capabilities and adjusted their interactions accordingly. This wasn't predator and prey. It was two problem solvers exploring mutually beneficial arrangements. The feedback loop accelerated as each participant's intelligent responses reinforced the other's non-instinctual behavior. The professors witnessed firsthand that intelligence isn't just another trait, it's a game changer for evolutionary dynamics. They'd always treated intelligence as simply another adaptive characteristic, like camouflage or speed. But what they observed was intelligence functioning as a meta-tool that could reshape how all other traits were employed. The creature's physical capabilities remained the same, but their application transformed completely when guided by intelligent calculation rather than instinctual programming. This revelation upended fundamental assumptions about evolutionary biology. Species weren't locked into predetermined behavioral patterns based on their physical adaptations. Intelligence created behavioral plasticity that could override millions of years of evolutionary programming when circumstances warranted. The most dangerous predator in the galaxy had just demonstrated that smart beats strong when it comes to survival strategy. Its evolutionary advantages remained intact, but their deployment became negotiable based on situational analysis. What happened next would make this theoretical insight into practical galactic policy. The professors weren't just watching a classroom incident. They were witnessing a paradigm shift in interspecies relations. If intelligence could override instinct this effectively, then traditional conflict models needed complete reconsideration. The assumption that predator species would always behave predictably based on evolutionary programming was now demonstrably false. This changed everything from first contact protocols to diplomatic strategy to military planning against aggressive species. Here's what happens when established science meets inconvenient facts. Either the facts change or the science does. The xenobiology department faced a choice: dismiss the incident as an anomaly or reconsider everything they thought they knew about interspecies dynamics. They could have filed it away as some freak occurrence, one of those statistical outliers that every research project generates but nobody takes seriously. That would have been the easy path. Maintain the existing models, update the safety protocols, and continue teaching the same material they'd been teaching for centuries. But the evidence was too compelling, the implications too significant to ignore. Dr. Yothura's crystalline form actually changed color from the cognitive dissonance of it all. Their facets shifted through 7 distinct hues normally associated with extreme philosophical turmoil, a visual representation of an entire career's worth of assumptions unraveling in real time. You could practically hear the sound of mental frameworks collapsing across the lecture hall as faculty members from 12 different species attempted to process what they'd witnessed. The standard predator-prey models, carefully constructed over generations of research, were suddenly inadequate to explain the interaction they'd just observed. Comparative evolutionary biology suddenly needed new chapters on intelligence-mediated predator-prey dynamics. The long-standing models that categorized species into simple predator-prey binaries were suddenly inadequate frameworks for understanding complex interspecies relationships. They'd been working with a 2-dimensional map, while the territory itself had always been 3-dimensional. The faculty realized they'd been studying biology while missing the most important variable: intelligent agency. They documented physical adaptations and instinctual behaviors while largely ignoring how cognition could reshape those behaviors. In real time, human history alone provided countless examples of cooperative relationships with species that should have been threats. Wolves became hunting partners. Elephants became workforce collaborators. Even big cats occasionally found roles in human societies that went beyond simple domination. The galactic scientific community had dismissed these as anomalies or primitive attempts at domestication, rather than recognizing them as evidence of a different approach to interspecies relations. They'd been so focused on categorization that they'd missed the patterns of cooperation that didn't fit their classification systems. Shadow. Ma's behavior proved that intelligence creates its own social category that transcends traditional relationships. This wasn't about predator or prey, dominant or subordinate. It was about conscious beings finding mutually beneficial arrangements outside their evolutionary programming. The creature's actions demonstrated that intelligence isn't just another trait, but a meta-capability that can reshape how all other traits are employed. It could choose cooperation over conflict, communication over confrontation, partnership over predation. The incident became required viewing for every xenobiology student in the galactic curriculum. First-year students now watch the security footage alongside classic predator-prey models, not as an exception, but as evidence of what's possible when intelligence engages intelligence across species lines. The footage shows the entire sequence, from containment breach to belly presentation to the eventual partnership that formed between human and predator. It's studied not as a safety failure but as a diplomatic breakthrough. The thing is, once you've seen the impossible happen, it's hard to go back to thinking in old categories. The faculty found themselves questioning other established truths, re-examining research that had been considered settled science for generations. If the Shadow Maw could rewrite its evolutionary programming through intelligent choice, what other creatures might possess similar capabilities? The incident became the pebble that started the avalanche, forcing a complete reconsideration of how intelligent species interact across evolutionary boundaries. Textbooks were rewritten, research priorities shifted, and an entire generation of xenobiologists began looking at predator-prey relationships through a new lens, one that recognized intelligence as the wild card that could change everything. Sometimes the best diplomacy is just making friends became the new guiding principle. The incident demonstrated that relationship building could achieve what years of formal negotiations had failed to accomplish. The focus shifted from crafting perfect agreements to establishing genuine understanding, from manipulating terms to building trust. This approach recognized that interspecies relations weren't just about Li-Yi alignment, but about finding common ground in values and understanding. What happened next would formalize this approach across the galactic community. The Corvani Agreement became the model for a new diplomatic strategy, based on demonstration rather than negotiation, on showing rather than telling. 3 young Corvani enrolled in the education program within weeks, their presence serving as living proof that the new approach worked, where traditional methods had consistently failed. The classroom incident had grown from a safety breach to a diplomatic revolution, with a human student and her unlikely partner rewriting galactic relations through simple, genuine connection. You know how most galactic protocols are hundreds of pages of legalistic nonsense? This one fit on a sticky note. The Galactic Council, faced with overwhelming evidence, had to formalize what they'd witnessed in that classroom. They had terabytes of data, hundreds of witness accounts, and security footage that contradicted everything they thought they knew about interspecies relations. Their usual approach would have been to form 17 subcommittees, draft thousands of pages of regulations, and create a bureaucratic structure so complex nobody could actually implement it. Instead, they looked at the simple, effective approach that actually worked and decided to copy it. Traditional diplomats hated the idea. Where were the sub-clauses, the contingencies, the carefully worded exceptions? They wanted defined escalation protocols, approved gesture libraries, and emergency termination procedures. The old guard argued that you couldn't reduce first contact to basic principles. You needed detailed scenarios and approved responses for every possible situation. They'd built entire careers on complexity, and here came this human-influenced approach that said maybe we're overcomplicating things. The debate lasted weeks, with traditionalists warning of catastrophe and innovators pointing to the Corvani breakthrough as proof simpler worked better. The new protocol was simple. Approach unknown species with the assumption that intelligence creates common ground. It replaced pages of threat assessment algorithms with a single guiding principle. Instead of assuming danger until proven safe, diplomats were instructed to look for signs of intelligence and attempt communication first. The protocol emphasized observation before action, understanding before judgment, and communication before defense. It wasn't about being naive. It was about recognizing that intelligent beings, regardless of evolutionary background, usually respond better to respect than suspicion. Shadow's phase-shifting and color-changing displays became the model for nonverbal diplomatic communication. Researchers documented how the creature used subtle visual signals to communicate intention and establish rapport. These weren't threat displays or submission gestures. They were conversation starters, attention markers, and relationship builders. The diplomatic corps developed training modules based on these patterns, teaching envoys how to use controlled visual signals to establish communication bridges before even attempting verbal interaction. It turned out that blinking lights in specific patterns could sometimes achieve more than hours of translated negotiation. Zoe's calm rapport with dangerous beings became the standard for first contact specialists to emulate. They studied her body language, her vocal patterns, her approach to establishing trust without submission. She hadn't used any special techniques or advanced technology, just basic communication skills applied with consistency and genuine intent. The diplomatic corps found that her methods worked across species lines, because they tapped into universal aspects of intelligent interaction rather than species-specific behaviors. Her approach became mandatory training for all first contact teams, replacing the previous defensive protocols that often escalated tensions. The protocol emphasized observation, calm communication, and looking for intelligence rather than assuming threat. It instructed diplomats to watch for cognitive patterns, problem-solving behaviors, and social dynamics before making assessments. Instead of categorizing species as friendly or hostile based on evolutionary traits, they were told to evaluate individual behavior and responses. This required more patience and better observation skills, but the results proved worth the investment. Encounters that previously would have resulted in standoffs or conflicts now often ended with basic communication established. 3. Young Corvani enrolling in the education program demonstrated the protocol's effectiveness better than any report. Their presence served as living proof that the new approach worked where traditional methods had failed for decades. These weren't diplomatic envoys or exchange students. They were regular Corvani youth choosing to learn alongside species their culture had previously considered beneath notice. Their successful integration into the educational environment showed that the friendship protocol could achieve lasting change rather than temporary agreements. The program's diversity statistics improved immediately, with previously reluctant species now willing to participate. Galactic relations shifted from fear-based caution to curiosity-driven engagement. The constant threat assessment and defensive posturing that had characterized interspecies interactions gave way to genuine interest in understanding different perspectives. Diplomats found themselves having actual conversations rather than performing carefully scripted negotiations. The change wasn't just procedural, it was cultural, affecting how species viewed each other and themselves within the galactic community. Conflict rates dropped, cooperation increased, and the entire tone of interstellar relations became noticeably more productive. The thing is, sometimes the most advanced diplomacy looks suspiciously like basic manners applied consistently. The fancy technology, complex protocols, and elaborate strategies often just get in the way of simple, genuine interaction. What changed galactic relations wasn't some breakthrough discovery or advanced technology. It was the recognition that treating others with respect and seeking understanding might work better than assuming the worst. The classroom incident had demonstrated that sometimes the most sophisticated solution is also the simplest one, and that intelligence, properly applied, can find common ground across any evolutionary divide. You know how most educational incidents end with detention, not interstellar diplomacy? Shadow's transformation from dangerous specimen to ambassador began almost immediately after the classroom incident. The Galactic Council initially wanted the creature returned to containment or euthanized as too dangerous to handle. Standard procedure called for immediate neutralization of any predator that demonstrated the capability to bypass security measures. Their risk assessment models showed a 97% probability of future incidents if the creature remained active. The paperwork for termination orders was already moving through approval channels when the first follow-up report started, changing minds. But Zoe's ongoing relationship with Shadow demonstrated something remarkable: stable, predictable cooperation. The two developed a working partnership that defied all previous understanding of interspecies dynamics. They established communication protocols, developed mutual trust signals, and even created a basic vocabulary of gestures and sounds that both understood. This wasn't a temporary truce or controlled captivity. It was genuine collaboration between two intelligent beings from completely different evolutionary backgrounds. The creature's behavior remained consistent and predictable, following patterns of social interaction rather than predation. The creature's intelligence and social nature made it an ideal candidate for interspecies communication experiments. Researchers began documenting its ability to interpret complex social cues, respond to subtle gestures, and adjust its behavior based on contextual understanding. It wasn't just following commands, it was participating in dialogues, offering its own suggestions, and demonstrating problem-solving capabilities that went far beyond simple stimulus-response patterns. The Maw's cognitive functions proved sophisticated enough to handle abstract concepts and complex social negotiations. Shadow began accompanying Zoe to diplomatic functions, where its presence had unexpected effects. At first, security protocols demanded 20-meter exclusion zones and multiple containment fields. But the creature's calm demeanor and responsive behavior gradually eased concerns. Its mere presence at negotiation tables changed the dynamic completely. Here was living proof that even the most dangerous beings could choose cooperation over conflict. Diplomats found themselves speaking more openly, posturing less, and seeking genuine understanding when confronted with this walking embodiment of interspecies possibility. Other species, particularly predatory ones, seemed to understand and respect the implied message of the human-shadow bond. They recognized the significance of a predator species voluntarily cooperating with a prey species without domination or subjugation. The partnership communicated more effectively than any diplomatic communique. It showed that strength could choose peace, that power could seek understanding, that evolutionary programming could be overcome through intelligent choice. Predatory delegates who had previously approached negotiations as dominance contest began, adopting more cooperative stances. The shadow maw became living, proof that even the most dangerous beings could choose cooperation over conflict. Its transformation from lethal specimen to diplomatic asset wasn't about training or control. It was about demonstrating that intelligence creates options beyond instinctual programming. The creature's presence at diplomatic functions became a powerful symbolic tool, reminding all parties that conflict wasn't inevitable and that even natural enemies could find common ground through communication and mutual respect. What started as a containment breach became the galaxy's most unlikely diplomatic tool. The creature that should have been euthanized as a security risk instead became a living symbol of interspecies cooperation. Its ability to communicate across species lines, its calm presence in high-tension situations, and its demonstration of intelligent choice over instinctual behavior made it more valuable than any traditional diplomatic asset. The Council found themselves deploying their former problem creature as a solution to diplomatic stalemates that had persisted for decades. Meanwhile, the Corvani homeworld was about to become the ultimate test case for this new approach to interspecies relations. A species that had resisted all previous diplomatic overtures, viewing them as weakness or deception, was now facing a negotiation where the primary asset wasn't a skilled diplomat or tempting trade agreement, but a predator that had chosen cooperation. The stage was set for the most unconventional diplomatic mission in galactic history, with a human student and her unlikely partner about to attempt what seasoned ambassadors had failed to achieve for generations. Here's the thing about apex predator diplomacy. It doesn't follow standard protocols. The Corvani were a species that respected strength above all else, and they'd never negotiated with what they considered prey species before. Their entire culture was built around dominance hierarchies and power displays, with diplomacy viewed as either preliminary to conflict or admission of weakness. They'd rejected every previous Galactic Council overture, viewing peaceful approaches as evidence of inferiority or deception. Their negotiation style involved posturing, threat displays, and constant testing of boundaries rather than seeking mutual understanding. Standard diplomatic approaches had failed for decades, with the Corvani viewing peaceful overtures as weakness. They'd ignored trade agreements, dismissed cultural exchange programs, and responded to conflict mediation attempts with aggressive counterdemands. Their leadership consistently interpreted negotiation attempts as either submission or preparation for betrayal. The standard diplomatic toolkit, compromise offers, mutual benefit proposals, confidence-building measures, only reinforced their belief that other species were either weak or manipulative. The Galactic Council had reached an impasse where traditional diplomacy only made things worse. Zoe's arrival with Shadow changed the dynamic immediately. Here was a species the Corvani would classify as prey walking with a recognized apex predator as equals. The sight of a human and Shadow Maw moving together as partners defied the Corvani's entire understanding of interspecies relationships. Their cognitive frameworks had no category for this interaction. It wasn't dominance or submission, but something entirely outside their experience. The Corvani delegation's body language shifted from aggressive posturing to curious observation as they tried to process this apparent contradiction. Shadow's respectful head-lowering gesture to Grathixis. The Corvani leader communicated more than any translator could. This wasn't submission. It was recognition of status between apex predators, the kind of gesture that spoke directly to Corvani cultural values. The maw's movement was precise, deliberate, and carried layers of meaning that diplomatic language couldn't capture. It said, "I acknowledge your strength," without saying, "I submit to your authority," striking exactly the right balance for Corvani social protocols. The two apex predators began a nonverbal dialogue of body, language, and subtle signals that humans could only partially interpret. Their interactions followed patterns of predator social dynamics that transcended species boundaries: posture adjustments, gaze management, subtle weight shifts that communicated intention and assessment. This was conversation at its most fundamental level, bypassing linguistic barriers and cultural misunderstandings. The Corvani watched Shadow's movements with clear recognition. They understood this language far better than they understood diplomatic phrasing. Zoe's simple presence demonstrated that humanity understood predator psychology in a way no other species did. Her calm demeanor alongside Shadow showed that humans could navigate predator social structures without either dominating or being dominated. She wasn't controlling the maw or being controlled by it. They were partners operating with mutual respect. This demonstration of cross-species, partnership based on understanding rather than force, resonated with Corvani values in ways that traditional diplomacy never could. The Corvani invitation to formal relations came not after lengthy negotiations, but after observing the human-shadow relationship. They extended the offer during a break in proceedings, bypassing all the carefully prepared agendas and negotiation points. The decision wasn't based on trade terms or security agreements. It was based on recognizing that humanity operated from a position of strength they could respect. The Corvani saw in Zoe and Shadow a model of interspecies relations that aligned with their own values while offering new possibilities. The creature's attention locked onto a Voltherian student whose bioluminescent markings were flashing emergency patterns. Classic target selection, isolated, visibly panicked, showing clear flight response precursors. The maw's hind legs tensed, claws extending through the floor material without resistance. This was where the incident report should have ended with casualty estimates and containment failure analyses. Then one human did the exact opposite of what survival instincts dictate. While every other life form was either freezing or fleeing, Zoe Hartwell took one step forward, kept her breathing steady, and made direct eye contact. Not challenging, not fearful, just observant. The maw's attack sequence aborted mid-preparation. Its head tilted, hunting focus broken by something that shouldn't exist. A prey specimen that wasn't acting like prey. What happened next shouldn't have been possible according to any known behavioral model. The creature's threat assessment protocols were receiving conflicting data. Here was a biological entity that matched prey characteristics in size and apparent vulnerability, yet showed zero fear responses, made no attempt to flee, and maintained calm physiological readings. Its intelligence override systems engaged, temporarily suspending instinctual programming to process the anomaly. The maw's pupils dilated as it recalculated, its tail relaxing from attack position to curious inquiry mode. Meanwhile, the human student was already moving to the next phase of her unscripted response, completely bypassing galactic survival training protocols. You know how every disaster has that one person who didn't read the emergency procedures manual? Zoe Hartwell wasn't being brave or reckless. She was operating on a completely different set of assumptions. While everyone else saw a monster from Kepler 442b, she saw something that looked familiar in a deeply ancestral way. Her brain wasn't processing threat assessment protocols. It was running ancient human pattern recognition software that said predator, but not necessarily enemy. That distinction made all the difference. Human history is full of stories about facing down predators, but our approach has always been different. Where other species developed better hiding spots or faster running speeds, humans developed something else: the ability to communicate across species lines. We didn't just avoid predators, we made working relationships with them. Wolves became dogs, wildcats became companions, and somewhere in our evolutionary history, we learned that not every sharp-toothed creature needs to be fought or fled. Sometimes you can just talk to them. Zoe's reaction wasn't in any training manual because human behavior with predators doesn't follow galactic norms. The standard protocols assumed all intelligent species would either fight, flee, or freeze when confronted with apex predators. Nobody considered that a species might try conversation instead. She didn't see a threat to be neutralized. She saw a confused animal in a strange environment, separated from its natural habitat and surrounded by panicking beings it didn't understand. Her assessment wasn't based on threat levels or danger ratings. It was based on observable behavior patterns. The faculty watched in horror as she did the one thing every survival guide explicitly forbids: made direct eye contact. Professor Zicht's 8 eyes widened in unison, his respiratory vents flaring in academic distress. The Voltherian teaching assistant actually dropped their datapad, the crystalline screen shattering on the floor. They were witnessing what they believed was a suicide gesture, the ultimate provocation that should trigger immediate attack response from any predator species. The safety manuals had whole chapters on avoiding eye contact, with detailed diagrams showing optimal evasion angles and head positions. But Zoe's gaze wasn't challenging or aggressive. It was the same look a human might give a stray dog, assessing, calm, open to communication. Her body language remained relaxed, shoulders down, breathing steady despite the adrenaline coursing through her system. She wasn't following the fight-or-flight binary that every other species in the room had defaulted to. She was operating on a third option that wasn't in the Galactic playbook: understand and engage. In that moment, Zoe wasn't following protocol. She was writing a new one based on human experience. Her actions came from thousands of years of human-animal interaction history, from the first wolves that decided to hang around human campfires to the big cats that ancient civilizations sometimes kept as companions. She was tapping into a deep evolutionary strategy that most other species never developed: the ability to form cross-species bonds through communication rather than domination. The thing is, human evolutionary strategy has always been about rewriting the rules rather than following them. We don't adapt to environments, we change them to suit our needs. We don't avoid predators, we find ways to make them our allies. Zoe's approach with the Shadow Maw wasn't some revolutionary new technique. It was humanity's oldest survival strategy applied to a new context. She was doing what humans have always done when faced with dangerous animals: looking for the common ground between intelligence and instinct. Here's what the textbooks say about looking predators in the eye. Don't, unless you want to be the main course. Direct eye contact with apex predators is universally recognized as a challenge, a threat, a dinner bell. Galactic xenobiology had this down to a science. Across 17 documented predator species, sustained eye contact triggered attack responses 98% of the time. The research was solid, peer-reviewed, and currently being proven completely irrelevant in real time. Zoe's steady gaze should have triggered the Shadow Maw's attack response immediately. Evolutionary biology across dozens of species confirmed this basic principle. Eye contact means aggression, dominance, confrontation. The Maw's own behavioral profiles showed it responded to direct visual engagement with immediate lethal force. Its neural pathways were wired to interpret staring as the prelude to combat, the biological equivalent of drawing a weapon. Every indicator pointed toward the human student, becoming a case study in why you follow established safety protocols. The professors were already mentally drafting the incident, reports and casualty notifications. Professor Zicht was calculating how to phrase student-ignored basic safety procedures in 14 different diplomatic languages. The Voltherian teaching assistant was running probability models on containment reestablishment timelines. They'd seen this play out before in training simulations: the gaze, the response, the inevitable outcome. The only unknown variable was how many additional casualties would occur during the intervention. But something strange happened. The predator didn't attack. It paused. It tilted its head in a gesture that wasn't in any behavioral database. The creature's thermal sensors detected no adrenaline spike from the human. Its auditory receptors picked up steady breathing patterns, and its olfactory systems registered zero fear pheromones. This wasn't adding up according to its threat assessment algorithms. The Maw's attack programming hesitated, caught between instinct and conflicting sensory input. The creature's posture shifted from aggressive to curious, from hunter to observer. Its claws retracted slightly, its tail relaxed from stiff attack position to gentle swaying motion, and the low-frequency threat vibration in its chest cavity ceased entirely. It was still assessing, still processing, but the calculation had changed from how to eliminate to What is this? Zoe's calm voice, her non-threatening stance, her direct gaze, they weren't signals of threat but of communication. She wasn't challenging the creature. She was engaging it. Her body language said conversation, where every other species said confrontation. The human approach to eye contact was fundamentally different. Not about establishing dominance, but about establishing connection. Where others saw provocation, humans saw potential understanding. The Shadow Maw recognized something in that gaze that no galactic scientist had ever documented. Intelligence, seeking connection. It wasn't just looking at prey or competition. It was looking at another conscious being attempting to communicate across species boundaries. The creature's cognitive functions, usually dedicated to tracking movement and calculating attack vectors, were suddenly processing social cues instead of threat indicators. Meanwhile, the xenobiologists were having simultaneous professional crises across the room. Dr. Yulthara's crystalline form actually flickered through several color patterns normally associated with extreme cognitive dissonance. The Voltherian researchers were frantically checking their equipment, convinced their sensors must be malfunctioning. Professor Zixth's 8 eyes were all focused on the same point for the first time in his academic career. They weren't just witnessing unexpected behavior. They were watching their entire understanding of predator psychology unravel in real time. Textbooks that had taken centuries to compile were becoming obsolete before their eyes, replaced by a human student who apparently hadn't read them. You know, when an apex predator breaches containment, standard protocol says evacuate, deploy stun teams, and pray. But here's the thing, nobody told the human student that. She just looked it in the eye and started talking. And the galaxy's entire understanding of predator-prey dynamics shattered in that moment. You know how every massive bureaucratic project starts with noble intentions and ends in paperwork purgatory? The Galactic Council's education initiative was supposed to be their crowning achievement. Dozens of species learning together in harmony. The kind of feel-good project that looks great in press releases and diplomatic summits. They had committees for everything. Interspecies desk ergonomics, atmospheric composition balancing. Even a subcommittee on acceptable snack food textures across carbon-based life forms. The whole operation was so layered with approvals and sign-offs that the actual teaching part became almost an afterthought. In practice, it became a monument to mismanagement. Safety protocols looked impressive in manuals, 3-inch thick binders full of flowcharts and contingency plans. But they fell apart in reality. The containment field for the Shadow Maw demonstration had 17 layers of bureaucratic approval, but only one actual safety redundancy. Every department had signed off on the paperwork, so everyone assumed it would work. That's administrative blindness. When the paperwork says you're safe, you stop asking whether you actually are. They had every species represented in that classroom. Crystalline beings from Cygnus X12 sat next to floral organisms from Kepler 186f, all arranged in a perfect circle, like some cosmic UN meeting with worse catering. The air smelled like ozone, photosynthesis byproducts, and mild anxiety. Professor Zix Thalen's comparative biology class was meant to be the showcase event, the proof this could work. His 8 eyes scanned the room with academic pride, completely missing the fact that his demonstration subject was studying them back. The containment field had passed every inspection because the inspectors checked the paperwork, not the field itself. The energy signatures matched the approved specs, the safety buffers showed proper calibration in the logs, and the emergency shutdown protocols had all the right stamps from the right departments. What it didn't have was any actual understanding of what it contained. They'd built a cage based on theories and assumptions, not the creature inside it. Everyone in that room, faculty, students, even the janitorial droids, assumed the protocols would hold because the forms said they would. The stage was set for disaster, with eager students taking notes and overconfident faculty preparing their lecture points, all completely unprepared for what came next. The breach wasn't just a failure of systems, but of imagination. Nobody considered what happens when the main attraction decides to join the audience instead of staying in its designated display area. What happened next would make every safety inspector in the galaxy reconsider their career choices. The containment field didn't fail with alarms and sirens, it just stopped being there. One moment the Shadow Maw was behind 3 layers of shimmering energy, and the next it was standing in the lecture hall, looking at 37 potential prey items who all thought they were protected by paperwork. Here's the thing about apex predators. They don't care about your diplomas or research grants. The Shadow Maw wasn't just dangerous, it was evolution's perfect answer to the question, how to kill everything efficiently. This creature had evolutionary adaptations that made terrestrial predators look like mildly annoyed house cats by comparison. Its hunting instincts were so refined that standard predator-prey models considered encounters with it automatically fatal. The Voltherian researchers had documented its capabilities with clinical precision: chase instinct, kill response, territorial behavior. They'd measured everything except what happens when it meets something that doesn't follow the rules. Every textbook chapter on predator behavior used the Shadow Maw as the definitive example of do not engage under any circumstances. Its teeth could phase through most known materials. Its claws could adjust their molecular resonance to match whatever they were cutting, and its eyes could track 16 different targets simultaneously while calculating optimal attack vectors. The containment was supposed to be foolproof. Multi-phase energy fields tuned to its biological signature, gravitational dampeners, sonic inhibitors. But as they say, nature always designs better fools. The creature's breach wasn't just an escape, it was a walking, breathing indictment of galactic overconfidence. What nobody accounted for was that intelligence could rewrite evolutionary programming in real time. The Maw's instincts said hunt, but its cognitive functions were sophisticated enough to process new data and adjust behavior accordingly. It had never encountered a classroom full of panicking academics before. This was entirely outside its documented experience. Standard procedure said it should immediately identify the weakest target and initiate pursuit. Instead, it paused to assess the strange collection of life forms reacting in ways it hadn't seen before. Meanwhile, one human student was about to demonstrate that the textbooks missed a crucial chapter. While crystalline beings retracted into defensive formations and floral species emitted distress pheromones, Zoe Hartwell was doing something the creature's behavioral profiles had no category for. She wasn't running, hiding, or exhibiting fear responses. She was studying it with the same clinical curiosity the researchers had shown when they first documented its species. The Maw's threat assessment systems were receiving conflicting data. Here was a potential prey item that wasn't acting like prey. The creature's initial response should have been immediate aggression toward the anomaly. That's what all the models predicted: eliminate the unknown variable. But its intelligence overrode the programmed response. It recognized something in the human's steady gaze and calm posture that didn't match any known predator or prey profile. The textbooks had detailed every conceivable reaction, except one intelligent being choosing to communicate with another across evolutionary boundaries. The containment breach had created the galaxy's most unexpected interspecies introduction. Standard protocol for predator breaches is simple: panic, run, and hope someone else is slower than you. When the Shadow Maw emerged from containment, the classroom transformed from academic setting to survival scenario in under 2 seconds. Every instinct, every training module, every evolutionary response screamed one thing: this is how you die. The creature's thermal sensors detected 37 distinct life signs. Its auditory receptors picked up elevated heart rates from 14 different circulatory systems, and its olfactory glands registered fear pheromones from at least 9 species. This was its natural habitat, a target-rich environment. Professor Zixth's "Remain Calm" announcement had the same effect as telling water not to be wet. His 8 eyes whirled in different directions, trying to track both the predator and his panicking students. The crystalline students retracted into defensive diamond-hard formations, their surfaces reflecting the emergency lights in fractured patterns. The floral species emitted distress pheromones that made the air smell like burning sugar and panic. 2 amphibious scholars from Gliesa 667cc began secreting defensive mucus that pooled on the polished floor. The entire room became a symphony of biological panic responses, each species playing its million-year-old survival score. Every being in that room had evolutionary programming that knew exactly how this ended, with someone being lunch. The Shadow Maw's posture shifted into textbook hunting mode, muscles coiling like carbon fiber springs, senses scanning for the first movement that would trigger the chase response. Its head lowered, hindquarters raised, tail stiffening into a lethal counterbalance. This was the moment every predator-prey dynamic model predicted, the instant where education and technology become irrelevant, and biology takes over. All the expensive interstellar tuition, all the advanced learning interfaces, all the galactic cooperation agreements, none of it mattered when facing evolutionary perfection.